Welcome to Paranormal or Reality. We have 4 stories that will make you think twice about watching this in the dark. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy this content. Let's begin. I worked in a Victorian inn for 2 years. That place was crazy haunted. After a while, I got used to it, and weird things became commonplace annoyances. It was called the Scotia Inn in Scotia, California. Google it. It's a real place, though it's no longer open at this point in time. There was one ghost hunter's blog post about it, but I can tell you that their story is totally fake. I was there when they did their investigation. Their story is completely made up except for one fact. The closet door did violently shake in the middle of the night. Otherwise, everything they say is made up. It was built in 1888, the same year the town was founded. It was originally called the Mawatak Inn. Unfortunately, it burned down in 1920. They rebuilt it in 1923 and renamed the Scotia Inn. The building is U-shaped, with the bend of the U being the front of the building that faces the street. The building is also 3 stories high, but includes an attic and a basement, along with a small bar in one corner of the downstairs area. When I started working there in 2014, the 3rd floor was closed down, as was Hall B of the downstairs area. The only areas open for use were Wing A, which was 3 rooms for rent, a small conference room, the entire 2nd floor, which consisted of 21 rooms including an exercise room, and the downstairs ballroom with a carpeted dining room. Now for the activity, it was all over the place, but also specific things were in specific areas. My first experience happened when I had been working there for about 2 weeks. I grew up in the town of Scotia, so of course I heard the rumors since childhood. Everyone knew the inn was haunted, but I didn't know specifics. The computer everyone had to clock in on was in the kitchen. I got there between 6:30 and 7 in the morning. The kitchen was usually empty. I went up the stairs around a blind corner when I saw a man standing in between the freezer and the counter. He didn't say anything, but he was wearing some sort of black uniform with gold buttons. Something I couldn't recognize at the time. I blinked and he was gone. I was startled, but not exactly scared. I was more excited that the rumors were true. I told my boss and she said, "Oh, that was Frank." Frank was the janitor at the inn. He used to live in one of the rooms upstairs. It's rumored that he died of old age on the premises. Before he was a janitor, Frank was a sailor, so I Googled it. I found out that sailors in the 1930s used to wear black uniforms with gold buttons. After Frank came other experiences. It's hard for me to remember what order exactly, but I know I noticed the shadows soon after. Hall A on the 2nd floor is where they were most active. They were shadows that would move on their own for no reason. The hall had rooms on both sides, but even when the rooms were empty and the doors were shut, unexplained shadows in that hallway would move around. They would move even if the doors were open too. It was easier to blame it on lights from the windows or something, but I knew it wasn't that. The shadows were moving by themselves. There was a shadow person in Hall B on the 2nd floor. That's the bend of the U-shape of the building. He would come in and out of room 214. Fun fact, the building was so old that when they built it, they skipped the number 13, so there was no room 213. The shadow man would come out of the room and walk down the hall, or just cross the hall into the exercise room. Once he stepped directly into my path, my vision was blacked out completely, but it was very briefly. It was as dark as if I had just closed my eyes. In room 215 was the room the ghost hunters I mentioned above stayed in. The closet door would rattle violently in the middle of the night. In room 216, there was something in that bathroom. I don't know what it was, but whenever I was cleaning it, I did it as fast as possible because I got this feeling. I wasn't alone in there. At the end of Hall C on the 2nd floor, there was a vanity table with an old mirror. If you walked down the hallway while looking in that mirror, you would see a man standing behind you. Of course, if you turned around, no one was there. In that same hallway, you would hear someone whistling a tune. Downstairs next to the dining room, there was this little seating area that had wooden doors that could be pulled closed to shut it off from the dining room. We jokingly called it the cave because it was unnaturally dark in there. It was like looking into pitch blackness, even though the dining area was decently lit. But once you passed those wooden doors, it would just cut off into darkness. In that same downstairs area, there were public bathrooms, which had a hall that led to what used to be the owner's living area. That area was guarded by Abigail. She used to be the lady of the manor. People have seen an older woman in a dress with her hair pulled back in a bun. But there were scratches on the mirrors, which have been replaced, and the scratches would appear again. Could just be vandalism, but strange, since it was in the same area as before. The stall doors would slam, the lights would flicker, and on multiple occasions the light bulbs would explode. Also, there's just a deep feeling of unease back there. Those are the big experiences I had working there. I had an array of small things that I witnessed as well. I caught a glimpse of a small girl on the landing of the stairs. She vanished as well. There was something that mimicked our voices. I would hear co-workers calling out to me from down a hallway when I knew they were not working that day. Sometimes a door wouldn't unlock until you asked it to. Once I felt someone tug on the back of my shirt and ask for help. I thought it was my boss's kids, so I said yes and turned around to find no one was there. I continued to work there until they closed in. I'm not sure it will ever open again, but I know those spirits will never leave. My name is John, and the story I'm about to tell is the truth, as I clearly remember it. Seeing a ghost for the first time is something I think anyone would remember vividly, and I'm no different. This sighting was in 1987. I was 16 years old and grew up in Orange County, California. My good friend Jason and I would frequently get small groups of friends together and make the short drive from Westminster to Long Beach to explore the Queen Mary. When I say explore, I don't just mean walking around the hallways and decks. I mean everywhere. In every unauthorized area we could get into, we would. We would walk the wood planks just above the waterline in the very bottom of the ship to the famous haunted pool. Keep in mind that this was before 9/11, so in the 80s you could do fun stuff like this without fear of going to jail. You may get chased by some employee, but they weren't catching a 16-year kid fast on his feet. Anyway, one night Jason, his girlfriend Holly, and I decided to roam around the Queen Mary. As we explored, we went to our typical spots, nothing special. The entire ship seemed empty. Nobody was walking around, probably because it was a weeknight. We ended up on one of the party decks. There were large speakers set up for music, an area for a dance floor, and a stage for a DJ. On this deck was a square grate that was about 4 by 4 and came up from the deck at about knee-high. You could look down through the grate and see all the way down to the bottom of the ship. There was a ladder running from the opening below the deck all the way down, with every level having a watertight hatch leading out of the shaft. This was somewhere we hadn't been before. Until that moment, I didn't even know it existed. We wanted to check it out, but the grate was screwed down. I thought that we were done, but before I could say, "Let's get out of here," Jason began unscrewing each screw with a coin. His girlfriend and I kept watch while he was working on the screws. He had the cover off in no time. We quickly looked around, and it was still completely void of people. I went down first, then Jason right behind me, as we scaled down the ladder. Please keep in mind that I have explored just about every part of that ship and had never been afraid of anything. I was one of those kids that had no fear. At least I hadn't up to that point. As we passed the second level, nearing the third, I began to become fearful. Not like scared of a ghost or scared of falling several feet to my death, but a different kind of fear. Fear that I've never experienced before or since. I had a fear that if I didn't get out, I was going to die. This feeling came over me before I saw anything. The fear was building and peaked when I reached the third level. That's when I saw him, and he saw me. We made complete eye contact. On the deck of the offshoot, there was a watertight door and a large pile running from the bottom of the deck above to the third level deck. Behind that pole was clearly a young boy in 1940s period clothing suit, no tie or bow, but he had a hat that matched his jacket. The hat was of same period. This boy was kneeling and shivering as he held onto the pole, half of him obscured by the pole. I honestly almost knocked my friend Jason off the ladder trying to get out. I had mentioned the fear that came over me. The fear wasn't of seeing a ghost, but a feeling that if I didn't get out, I was going to die. I honestly think that the fear wasn't mine, but was that of whosever's spirit I encountered that night. I don't know who or what that truly was, but what I can tell you is, that was the last time I ever went back to the Queen Mary. I would love to know if this ghost has been sighted or mentioned in their ghost tours. I don't believe those tours existed in the 80s. My sister went to UCLA for her undergrad. In her first year, she decided to live in an apartment complex directly across the LA National Cemetery. On move-in day, my dad and I helped her move. From my perspective, it was a completely normal day with nothing out of the ordinary. As soon as we left, however, my dad told me that he saw something in the apartment and was worried. For context, my dad is a physician, but is very religious and has had a lot of inexplicable things happen in his life. He's had premonitions, things that were 100% accurate. He can see things that many would consider paranormal entities or demonic spirits. Thankfully, I have not inherited that spiritual sensitivity. Anyways, my dad goes on to explain that. As soon as we walked into my sister's apartment, he saw a dark shadow quickly move through the living room and left through the back window, causing the blinds to be moved apart. He walked over to the window to check if it was open. Maybe it was an animal of some sort that let itself in. But the window was closed. Coincidentally, it was the window directly facing the cemetery. Over the course of 2 years, my sister and her roommates experienced quite a few paranormal activities that over time became regular occurrences. My sister would often hear her name being called out from the living room when nobody else was home. They'd be awakened in the night by someone tapping and shaking their leg while also whispering their name. Pots and pans would be moved in the kitchen when everyone was asleep. One thing that stood out to me was one weekend when I was visiting, her roommate called everyone up to her loft and showed us how the hairs on her arm would stand up in a specific area of the room. Then as soon as she moved away, the hairs would go back down. She demonstrated this over and over. Each time she crossed the invisible boundary, her arm hairs would go straight up, then back down when she moved away. It wasn't just my sister's apartment that was haunted, though. Her neighbor also had paranormal experiences. The girl who lived next door said she could even see the spirits when she came over to my sister's apartment. She would sometimes move out of the way suddenly, as if letting someone pass by. This really scared my sister, so she stopped inviting her over. The same neighbor also told a story about how her boyfriend, an athletic guy, came over to visit once and was shoved backwards to the ground as if he was tackled. On one occasion, my sister was at the apartment alone and kept hearing her name being called out from the upstairs loft. She was so freaked out that she called me and asked me to sleep over because she was too scared to even leave her bed. Mind you, I was in college in San Diego at the time, 2-hour drive away. It was after midnight. Also, I was at a frat party. Despite all that, I made the drive because I knew her place was legitimately haunted. Lucky for me, I experienced absolutely nothing while I was there for the weekend. I grew up in a pretty old town in Northern California. Everyone I knew had a ghost story. You knew you were finally solid friends when the ghost stories came out. I'd like to post the collected tales from my hometown. When I was in my early 20s, I had a boyfriend, let's call him Malachi, who was a paranormal magnet. He was good at the spooky, so I always took his stories with a grain of salt, but they were pretty good. He was about 6, and his family was visiting his grandparents. Sometime during the visit, he had a nap, and when he woke up, he couldn't find any adults. He searched the house, then went down to the basement. There was a bathroom down there that his father preferred. He opened the bathroom door to check, and there, fully clothed, sitting on the toilet, was a fisherman. He was a grizzled guy, wearing the yellow rain slicker and hat, black galoshes, and holding a mug of coffee. Malachi was quite surprised but didn't move or say anything. The fisherman looked over at him and said, "Hey there, you want some coffee?" He offered the mug, which Malachi took for reasons only a 6-year-old can tell you. He sipped the coffee, then gave the mug back. That was when he heard the front door close upstairs. Malachi looked up briefly, then back, and the fisherman was gone. with Malachi blocking the only way out. Apparently, his parents had gone to the store, and his grandparents were in the yard. Malachi claimed that the ghost coffee was the best damn coffee he ever tasted in his life. Thanks for tuning in. Watch another video if you dare.